Welcome into the Ashes to Awakening podcast with your host, Christian Huskins. I'm super excited to have you here today. But before we go into today's episode, I just want to pause and bring an announcement forward. And that is, I am now accepting applications for my one-on-one coaching program. If you have been someone that's done the work, you've listened to all these podcasts, you've done the journaling, you've gone to therapy, you've read every book, trying to manifest, and still you feel stuck. Maybe you keep ending up in the same relationships, different people, different names. Yet the energy, the behaviors, and the patterns are all the same, even though you swore next time would be different. Maybe you know exactly why you do what you do, yet you have the inability to insert the pause to change the behavior. If you're exhausted from being the strong one, the fixer, the one who holds it all together for everyone else, pouring into everybody while no one is pouring into you, and you're certainly not taking the time to pour into yourself, all the while feeling like you're falling apart silently on the inside. Maybe you've shrunk down who you are so many times to keep the peace, to be accepted, that when you look in the mirror, you don't even know who you are anymore. I want you to know that I hear you, I see you, and I understand you. So what if one day you could just stop? You could just sit still and look at the ashes at your feet, the relationships that burned, the versions of you that you had to let go of, the pain that you swallowed to survive. And you realize something in that moment, that those ashes are not your ending. They are your beginning. Not just surviving what happened to you, but rising from it. And that is what I mean by ashes to awakening. I built this specifically for you. So applications are now open for my Elite Emotional Freedom Platinum Coaching Program. If something that I said today made your chest tighten, that is not coincidence, it's awareness. The link to apply is in the show notes. Say yes to yourself today. You are worth it. Now let's get to today's episode. Welcome back to the Ashes to Awakening podcast with your host, Christian Huskins. If this is your first time here, welcome in. I'm so glad to have you here. And if you are a returning listener, welcome back. I feel extremely blessed and grateful to have all of you here today. So before we get started, I really just want to start setting some intention. Intention to allow yourself to just be today. The information you're hearing, maybe some of the responses that you might be feeling, just allow yourself to be. Be still, be present, be intentional, and be open. No judgment, criticism, shame, blame. None of that is allowed in this space. Just be open to the awareness. Take what lands and leave the rest behind is what I say. So if you feel, when you're listening to this, some resistance to turn it off, please stay. Please stay. Because if you found your way to me today, it's not on accident. Very much purpose, because there's something I'm going to say today that you needed to hear. Also, if you did not watch the last episode, episode 2, where I talked a lot about the subconscious mind and how patterns from early childhood shape who we become, if you haven't listened to that, I highly suggest that you go back and listen to that, because it will add more context to this episode. If you haven't grabbed your paper and writing utensil, please go do that now because you're going to want to take notes today. So I want to just start by taking a nice deep breath. We're going to ground ourselves, holding it, and exhale, and just really blow it out gently, but blow it out, allowing your shoulders to drop, your body to just relax. Stress, anxiety, fear, none of that is welcome here. Okay? Just allow yourself to be. So let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision, choice, that maybe you said yes when you really wanted to say no? Maybe there was a job opportunity that consciously you really wanted, but somehow you found a way to talk yourself out of it. Maybe you're in a toxic relationship and you know it's toxic, yet you stay in it longer than you should have. And then afterwards, of course, you have that thought of, why do I keep doing this? I'm very aware, but why do I keep doing this? And the answer isn't about willpower. Okay, it's not about being smart enough or strong enough. The more honest answer really is that some of the decisions that your adult self is making, they're not being made by your actual adult self. They're being made by that much younger child, your inner child. The one who learned how to survive at 2-3 years old. The one who developed beliefs about safety, love, and belonging, and even identity. Really, the beliefs that made so much common sense back then. But those beliefs have still been running the show quietly in the background ever since. So today we are going to be talking about the childhood wound that is still making your adult decisions. Not because you're broken, not because you're weak, not because there's something wrong with you. Simply because your nervous system, your subconscious mind, and your sense of identity learned patterns long before your adult self had the awareness to question it. What I want you to hear before we go any further, though, is that the wound is not always a dramatic thing that happens to you. Okay? Sometimes, and this is really the part that most people really miss, is that the wound is what you needed and you never received. The wound is not about something that dramatic happened to you. Not always. It's what you needed and you never received that created this wound. Okay? So I hear it constantly from individuals who come into my world, whether that's clients, my kids' friends of friends, out at the bowling alley, singing karaoke, playing pool, at a football game, whatever that looks like. I'm an empath, so people tend to just dump, and that's okay. I'm made for it. But when I'm trying to help individuals maybe determine where that root is that caused it, I hear a lot of people say back to me that my childhood wasn't that bad. My childhood was pretty good. I had love. We had money. My parents had a job. We went on vacations. My childhood wasn't that bad. And maybe it wasn't. Right? Maybe there was no single event that there was some obvious trauma. Okay? But there's still walking around with anxiousness. They're still reactive. Okay? Maybe they're still overly responsible for everyone around them. Making sure that everyone has what they need, carrying everyone else's emotions, even though they're not yours to carry, trying to control everything, still choosing relationships that leave them feeling unseen. Your childhood does not have to have been filled with chaos, trauma, drama for you to still carry the wound. Okay? In fact, this is the part I really want you to hear today, and that is some of the most deeply impactful wounds come from homes that are filled with love. Homes that had two parents that worked and worked really hard. Homes where nothing was, quotes, wrong on the outside. Yet, some of the quietest and most overlooked wounds are the ones that are still running the show. Because when nothing obviously bad has happened, we don't have a clear story to point to, right? How many people do you know have a story? And they grab onto that story. But when nothing has really happened to you, you don't have a story to point it to, right? You just have a feeling. It's just a pattern that keeps showing up. It's a persistent sense that something is off, and you just don't know why. You can't figure it out, okay? One of the biggest and quietest hidden wound that there is, and it sets the foundation, is emotional neglect. And emotional neglect is not what happened to you. It is what needed to happen and didn't. I'll repeat that. Emotional neglect is not what happened to you. It is what was needed to happen and didn't. It's the absence of what I call emotional attunement. Okay? The gap between what you needed to feel safe, seen, and emotionally supported, and what was actually available to you. And it can happen in the most loving households. It happened in mine. Okay? So it can happen in the most loving households. Because the adults in your life were doing the very best that they could with what they had, with what they knew. You think that you're the only one with past trauma? No. Okay? So here is what emotional neglect can look like. And I want you to sit with these because you really may recognize yourself in some of these, and that's okay. Awareness, guys. Remember I said awareness. So just sit with these, write them down. The first one, the first example is your parents worked hard all the time. Okay? They were physically present, maybe even financially generous, but emotionally unavailable. The house was running, the bills were paid, but you felt like when you had emotions pop up like fear or sadness or confusion, there was no one there to help you make sense of it. Okay? The second example is you never felt safe sharing how you felt. Okay? Not because someone told you not to, and sometimes it did, right? I grew up in a house where we didn't feel emotions. So, not because someone told you not to, but because the energy in the house said, we don't do that here. If you have parents that are not modeling the behavior of stepping into what they feel, stepping into talking through conflict or talking through emotions, if the child never sees you doing that, that's a belief that they take on. We just don't do that here. My parents don't do it, so I'm not supposed to do it. But then they lean on you and say, tell me how you feel. Right? So your emotions in this situation are minimized, they're brushed off, or responded to with frustration. Stop being a baby. How many of you heard that? Okay, so you learn to manage these feelings alone. Maybe your parents may have been so emotionally dysregulated themselves. Okay, their emotions filled the room. The tension, the mood swings, the unpredictability. So your emotions, your thoughts, your needs, they felt too big to add to that. So you keep the peace. You learn to keep everything in. You make yourself smaller. And over time, the habit of swallowing your feelings to manage everyone else's comfort becomes the foundation of something that will show up later in your life, like people pleasing. Okay? Maybe, here's another example, you were never given space to process your emotions in a healthy way. There was no, hey, I see that you're upset. Can you tell me what's going on? Right? There was no co-regulation, no teaching you how to name what you're feeling or helping you move through it. Just emotions just had to go somewhere, so they went inward. Okay? Trust me, guys, I understand how you're feeling right now. Maybe another example is you were praised for performing, not for being. So you got attention when you were achieving, when you were helping, really not even helping, but going over and beyond. So maybe you never got recognized. Maybe you were given 5 chores and you did those 5 chores, but you did maybe 2 extras. And when you did that, you were praised. Thank you for being so helpful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But maybe you just did what was asked of you and you never got great job. Right? So you got the attention when you were achieving something, when you were helping, doing more, when you were being good. Not simply for existing, for trying, right? This teaches you guys that your value is conditional and that love is something you have to earn. So the last example I have here is that you were the emotional caretaker. So maybe your parents leaned on you emotionally, and you can become the caretaker a lot when your parents maybe have an addiction or they're a workaholic, right? So your parents leaned on you emotionally. Maybe you learned to read the room to keep the peace. I've done it. Maybe you become responsible for other people's moods without ever being taught how to honor your own. So none of these things require abuse. Okay? None of it. None of these require a villain. And yet, all of them can leave a mark so deep on how your nervous system learns to navigate the world as you become an adult. So let's take a deep breath, okay? I want to breathe for a minute, because I'm going to break down the 5 most common childhood wounds, how they develop, what behaviors it creates, and why. Okay, so let's work through these 5. And I see these with my clients and people around me, how they develop, how they were developed makes so much sense. So let's break these down. Wound number 1 is the emotional neglect wound. That's what we were just talking about. So how it develops is it develops with when your emotional world was not met consistently. Okay? Consistency is the key word here. Feelings were minimized, dismissed, or there was just simply no one around to help you regulate. No one taught you how to regulate because, again, maybe your parents are dysregulated. So it creates the behaviors of, difficulty identifying your own needs, overgiving, staying silent, chronic feelings of emptiness or disconnection, even when life looks fine on the outside. Okay? And you learned this because of what you're going through, and your inner world learned that it was not important. It's not safe to express. So you stop really tending to it. Okay? Your inner world is not important or safe. Safe is the biggest word. When children feel safe with you, they are not afraid to talk about what's going on. All right, so wound number 2 is the abandonment wound. And this develops because maybe a parent or a caretaker was physically or emotionally absent. Okay? Inconsistency, unpredictability, especially in attachment. So you never know what version of them that you're going to get. How many of you have that? How many of you grew up where especially one parent was just so inconsistent and unpredictable in their attachment, in their emotions, in their behavior? Okay? You never knew what version you were going to get, and that's scary. But check in with yourself. If you have children, are they safe? And are they, do they know the version of you that they're going to get all the time because you're consistent and you're predictable? Or not? Again, awareness, okay? So what behaviors it creates here is fear of people leaving, clinging, like clinging on to somebody, anxious attachment, or chasing in relationships. You don't like to be chased, you do the chasing. Okay? You push people away before they can leave. Before they can hurt you, I'm going to push you away. Self-abandonment is a huge thing here. Sacrificing who you are to keep someone close. Your nervous system learns that love is not guaranteed, so it's always scanning for signs of rejection or loss. It was a big one for me. I have to say, I had a lot of abandonment emotionally and physically, but definitely emotionally. So wound number 3 is the parentification wound. And this develops because you became responsible for your parents' emotional state or their stability or functioning of the household. If you have one parent that's an addict and that's where they're at, and you have another parent who is a workaholic because they don't want to come home, but you have siblings, so then you have to step into that caretaking role, this parentification wound will develop, okay? Because you were the one that was holding everything together. So the behaviors that it creates is chronic over-responsibility, control, instability emotionally, okay? Because you don't even know what your emotions are because you've always had to handle that. You have the inability to ask and or receive help. You have exhaustion from carrying everyone else. And you definitely have difficulty setting boundaries without guilt. So why this develops is you were rewarded or just simply survived by managing others. Rest and receiving feel dangerous because they were never safe. That was never safe to have been done as a child. You couldn't rest because you had to be the parent. Now, as an adult, resting feels unsafe. Okay? Wound number 4 is the rejection wound. And this develops, when there was criticism, comparison, shame, or conditions placed on your love. When love was conditional, I love you, but thank you for doing that, but there was always a condition. Being told really overtly or subtly that who you are was never quite right, was never quite good enough. You always fell short. Okay? And this develops people-pleasing, perfectionism, procrastination, hiding your real self, not really knowing who you are. Okay? A constant awareness of what others might think, like comparing yourself like constantly, or shrinking yourself. Okay? You shrink yourself because you don't want to be fully seen. But you're comparing yourself. So you compare yourself to say, okay, if I want to be like Sally, I have to shape-shift this. And then when you get to be that, now you have people looking at you and now you feel naked because you've never been seen. Okay? This develops because being fully seen has always felt dangerous. So you really learned in this space to perform a version of yourself that was most likely to be accepted. And wound number 5, this is the worthiness wound. And this develops, when love, praise, or security was conditional. Okay? It came when you performed, when you achieved, or you pleased. Not just simply being who you are. And what behaviors this creates is Feeling like you have to earn rest. Isn't that fun when you have to feel you have to earn rest? Or that you have to earn success, you have to earn love, or you have to earn good things because you're not just being you isn't good enough to receive love, success, good things. Okay? So self-sabotage really enters here. And when life gets really good, how many of you been in a relationship and man, you're just in a beautiful relationship, it's peaceful, it's calm, and all of a sudden one of you just starts causing chaos? That's this. This is self-sabotage. So when things get too good, you self-sabotage because you have difficulty receiving. Okay? You internalized the belief that you are not inherently worthy. And that worth is something that you have to prove, not something that you are. Everybody is worthy. Okay? So I want to slow down here because this is where we're moving into here this is the big part. So I want to talk about everything we just talked about, how this hits home, because this is not abstract. These wounds are not just, things that you felt as a child. They are actively shaping your choices that you make today. So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples here. The first one is, let's say you're in a meeting and you are talking about an idea or a thought, and someone dismisses your idea. Okay? Instead of speaking up, you go quiet. You tell yourself that probably wasn't that good anyways. There's no logical thinking. It's the rejection wound that is running the show. Okay? So let's say you receive a job offer that would just change your life, right? It's more money, maybe a little bit more responsibility, but maybe that's what you want. More visibility. And instead of feeling so excited, you feel paralyzed. You start making excuses. You don't apply, or you turn it down, or you don't show up. Okay? This is not a lack of ambition. This is the worthiness wound protecting you from something. It decided that it wasn't safe, right? In episode 2, we talked about that, where your mind, the subconscious, is always making decisions to keep you safe, even though those decisions so many times are keeping you stuck. Okay? So another example would be, you've been in a relationship that you know is not right for you. Okay? But you stay. You explain, you justify, you shrink yourself to make it work. And I want you to understand that if you're in this type of relationship, this doesn't make you weak. Okay? That is the abandonment wound that would rather stay in an almost right relationship than risk the grief of losing it. The grief and the fear of being alone. Okay? Another example would be, someone asks you, "Hey, how are you doing?" And you say, "I'm fine." Even when you're not fine. When you're exhausted, you're overwhelmed, and you desperately need support. You need help. But you say you're fine because you learned a long time ago that your needs were too much. Okay? That is emotional neglect running quietly in the background. And the last example I want to give you is, you try to sit in silence. You try to meditate, to journal, to just be still. And you cannot make it 2 minutes without having to get up, to go do something. Your mind starts racing. The discomfort rises for just sitting. You reach for your phone and start the doom scroll. That's not poor discipline or poor attention or poor focus. That is a nervous system that has never been taught to feel safe in stillness. This is the parentification wound. Because stillness meant sitting and feeling. Okay? Sitting and feeling emotions, thoughts, or feelings that had nowhere to go. Okay? So in the silence, it's what I always say, in the silence, sometimes it's the loudest. And when we sit in silence, we sit in stillness. We are forced to be sitting with the thoughts, the feelings, and emotions that had nowhere else to go. Okay? So just take another breath with me, because if you have found yourself in some of these examples, it's okay. This is why we're doing this episode. I want you to understand here that this is the hardest part. Most people are afraid to heal. Not because they don't want to. Not because healing requires, so much. Because it doesn't. Not the type of healing that I do. But it's because healing requires you to look inward at what shaped you. It requires you to grieve what you needed and didn't receive. It requires you to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. And if you were never taught that discomfort could be survived, that feels impossible. Right? So many people are afraid to heal. But I want you to hear me on this, okay? The wound does not have to keep making your decisions. This is not the only option. Okay? So here is where we are. You now have the what, you have the why, you understand what these wounds are, how they developed, how they show up in the decisions that you make today, in your relationships, your career, your ability to receive, and your ability to just simply be still. So this is episode part 1. This is episode 3, part 1. And this is what you're getting, the what and the why. Now, I'm separating out part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is going to only be available to my subscribers. And the part 2 is the how. It's the coaching. It's the coaching tool that I'm going to go over with you on this episode. It's going to be an actual video, not just audio. And there'll be some 1 or 2 extra freebies that you'll get for additional coaching. So in part 2, I will walk you through the Adult Decision Repatterning Tool. Okay? And it's a 5-step coaching process. And it's designed to help you identify when a childhood wound is driving an adult decision so that you can have more awareness and step into it to insert the pause. Okay? And it allows you to really begin interrupting that pattern in real time. And this is where the actual work starts. Okay? So if you want access to that, you can become a subscriber using the link in the show notes. I also created a free childhood wound decision maker quiz. And this is really to help you identify which hidden wound may still be shaping your adult decisions, okay? Especially in your relationships, your self-worth, your boundaries, and even your success. And even probably more than that, your relationship with yourself, okay? So, when we can identify which hidden wound is doing that, we can then have awareness to put in the pause. So you can find the link in the show notes for the quiz. Take that first step towards awareness, right? And it's free. And then come back here and drop in the comment which one it was. Let's see how many of you have the same in common, right? So before I go, I want to leave you with one reflection question. And I really, really mean it as a question, not an assignment, just something to really sit with. And when you have a moment, write out your answer, right? So the question is, where in your life right now are you making a decision that feels logical? But in your body, in your gut, something about it feels like survival. Okay? You don't have to answer it out loud. Where in your life right now are you making a decision that feels logical? But in your body, in your gut, something about it feels like survival. Again, you don't have to answer it out loud, just notice it. All right, guys, well, that is a wrap for today's episode. And before I conclude here, I just want to sit with you and reflect. I want you to check in with yourself. Was there anything that landed with you today? Maybe something stirred in your body. Maybe it really resonated with you, made you lean in, maybe you had the light bulb go off and that aha moment. Because if you did, just sit with it. Because that is what I call awareness. We are unable to change, heal, fix anything that we are not in awareness of. So now you do have the awareness. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to just feel it and stay stuck? Or imagine the possibilities. What would it feel like to step into that and use that awareness as the beginning to your healing journey? So I just want you to reflect on that today. Okay? So a couple of reminders that I just want to give you before I let you go. The first one is to subscribe to my podcast. The link is below in the notes. And when you do subscribe, not just follow, but subscribe, you are given access to my private community that is exclusive for my podcast subscribers. I have 3 different types and tiers of my subscription, depending on the level of support and access that you are needing and requiring. My entry level is going to be my supporter level, and that's going to be $9.99 a month. The next level up is going to be my deeper healing level. That's going to be $19.99 a month. And then my top tier is my inner circle level, and that is going to be $29.99 a month. Okay, so check those out, see if they're, what's going to work best for you, and subscribe so that you don't miss any content and extra content at that. The other thing I want to remind you of is if you've ever sat back and just wondered where Coach Christian gets all of this information that I coach or educate to, it's just not my education. It's just not my lived experience, but it's my full story. The rawness, the vulnerability, the honesty, and I model behavior for my clients. And so I lead from example to show that healing is possible. So my memoir is called Ashes to Awakening, From Trauma to Transformation, How My Story Became My Purpose. You can find that on Amazon. The link is below in the show notes as well. You can obtain that on Kindle, Kindle Limited, paperback, and hardcover. And there's a lot of things in that story that I did not really want to share, but I did, because I knew that there was somebody out there that needed to hear my story. It's about my childhood experiences, the programming, the trauma, all the things that I took into my adult life and how that affected my relationships in my adult life. Then I talk pretty in depth about my near-death experience that I had and how that was an awakening to my healing journey, and what got me to sit here in this chair in front of you so that you can hear me and know that healing is possible. Okay, so check it out. If you're someone that resonates with people, with their story, maybe you need to hear that to not feel alone, to take a step forward, check it out. Again, the link is in the show notes below. Okay, so are you ready? Are you ready to go all in? Are you done feeling the way that you're feeling? Are you tired of feeling stuck? Then I invite you. Again, applications are open to apply for my Elite Emotional Freedom one-on-one platinum coaching program. And it is the most powerful one-on-one container that's out there. Okay, I work with a small number of clients, and the reason for that is so that I can be present and attentive. Okay, so again, the link to apply for that is also in the show notes below. So until next time, keep rising from the ashes. I believe in you. See you next time.